today's podcast, we talk about love of the game and how that can help develop culture, tight ends in a pro-style offense, and success and failure, and who gets credit and what you can learn from both of those. And joining me to talk about that today is the tight ends coach at Rice, Chris Monfiletto. Chris, great to have you here today.
Keith, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm excited about this.
So, Chris, we're going to go back to kind of the beginning for you when this all started, and in looking through your bio and talking before we got going here. You were right here in Northeast Ohio, and then at Kenyon College coaching D3 ball here in Ohio as well. So a lot of common ground there. But for you, when you look back at this game that you love, where did this all get started? When was the idea of Chris Monfiletto becoming a football coach hatched?
I think it's always something that I knew I wanted to do. And when I got to college and I really started to get involved more with the game plan and spending more time in the coach's office and stuff like that, learning it, there's just a love there that I didn't get rid of when I graduated and I stopped playing football. So actually, when I graduated from Davidson College, I got a job selling mortgages. And so I was selling mortgages and I was volunteering coaching at the high school that I was at. And I had the ability to coach a kid named Myron Roll, who's not a kid anymore. He's actually a really famous neuroscientist and doctor up in Boston. But he was the number one recruit in the country at the time. And there became a point in time where I realized that selling mortgages was not going to be my passion. Coaching football was. So I took a volunteer role at Hun, which is where I played high school football. And I had the ability to work with him for 2 years, and he really coached me more than I coached him, but it was a great learning experience for my first 2 years out of college.
Yeah, it's funny how that starts sometimes. I think back early in my career, I just started coaching high school ball. Prior to that, was coaching 7th and 8th grade football. And one of the kids we coached through that program went on and was All-American, high school All-American at St. Ignatius, went on to play at Boston College and had a cup of coffee with the New England Patriots as a backup. And I kind of learned a lot of the game from him. So I would work with him in the summer, but truthfully, I look at it as he was working with me. He'd bring back different things that I hadn't seen before. And, at the time, everything was not on the internet like it was today. So, any information you could get. I mean, I remember just like he'd give me his playbook, for the night, and I'd study the heck out of that thing. So we learn a lot from our players, though, I think, in every respect, even as you progress through your career. Is that something you found to be true as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the byproducts of him being the number one recruit in the country is that we had access to a bunch of camps like all over the country. So I remember that summer, my first year, I went from Penn State to Notre Dame to the University of Florida, and everywhere in between. And you got to learn from those coaches at that level at such a young age. And back then those camps were multiple days and they were overnight camps, and you got to really immerse yourself with the coaching staff and learn as much as you wanted to learn. So that was an invaluable experience for me. And then, moving into this year's role, moved into a tight end coaching position, and the room was a bunch of older guys. So, just being able to learn how they were coached before and what was effective for them and what wasn't, just having a dialogue with them more than anything, has been instrumental in my development as a tight end coach too.
When you look at some of those early years, and you had an opportunity early on to be a head coach at Western Reserve Academy here in Hudson, Ohio. When you looking at the lessons you learned early on, what kind of things continue to develop and really became part of who you are today as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I was a head coach at Western Reserve at a very, very young age. I mean, I think it was like 25 or 26 when I took over the program there. And I might have even been younger than that. I don't really remember. But, when you start and you're that young, like you have all this passion and all this enthusiasm and all this energy, and sometimes it gets harnessed in the wrong way because all you want to do is compete and all you want to do is win. And you lose sight of the fact that, like, you're not there necessarily for just that. You're there to develop the kids and to make sure that they're having an unbelievable experience. So, over time, you learn never to get too high and never to get too low, and kind of just stay the course. And, that rubs off on the guys. They still have the passion for playing football and competing and winning. But there are bigger lessons that football can teach you. And if you let those lessons, come to fruition and talk to those kids about all the things that you've learned over the course of the past, however many years of experience that you have, I think that's invaluable.
You went on to become the head football coach at Kenyon College, and it's a league I'm familiar with, a conference I'm familiar with. Kind of some disparity in the kids that you can get. Some of the schools in the conference can get kids that you can't even come close to touching as far as the academics. And you took over a program that was had a couple of winless seasons, and you managed to turn that around. What were some of the things that you feel were key to being able to make that kind of a turnaround?
Yeah, I think, the nice thing about being at a place like Kenyon is you're going to get guys that are going to develop and that want to develop. And they might not be, the starters coming out of high school at a great program or anything to that nature, but they're guys that are hungry to learn and that are hungry to grow. And there was one kid in particular that had actually broken his neck as a junior in high school and didn't get recruited by anybody. He came into us, he was like 150 pounds, and he was a receiver. And over a 4-year period, he turned into one of the best receiver in the league historically of all time. And he was 185 pounds when he graduated, and he had a minicamp tryout with the Washington Redskins. And, those are the type of guys that we were able to coach at Kenyon, guys that were just hungry to learn and hungry to grow, and that were going to put the time in after practice to make sure that stuff happened. So, the first goal at Kenyon was just making sure that the players that were on the team for the right reason. And we actually ended up finishing the first season with like 42 guys on the roster, but they were the right 42 guys, and they set a platform for us to continue to grow as a program over the course of the 7 years that I had the privilege of being there.
You've hinted to it a little bit already, but your love of the game really is what's driven you so far as a coach, driven you into the game as a coach. But something, you and I were talking even before you were coaching, you went to Davidson and didn't necessarily, you weren't the guy who was making all the plays. You were a role player, but somehow you were voted the team captain, and you felt that it was that love of the game and your passion for it really that helped put you into that position. Talk to us about, how that really is part of who you are as a coach now, and how it helps you build the culture in your room and contribute to the culture in your program.
Yeah, I think that, the best thing about football is that when you compete, it teaches you lessons about life, and I don't know that there's many other games that can do that if you allow it to do that for you, and you really have to take time and realize what your failures are and what your shortcomings are in order to let that happen. But that's why playing football was so fun for me, because although I wasn't the best player, I was actually a horrible football player. I was able to look at other guys that were performing better than me and try to mimic their work ethic and try to mimic their process and the way that they were doing things in order to try to become better as myself, but also to put myself in their shoes and try to lead the way that they led. And I had the privilege of learning from some really good guys that were in front of me and some really good coaches that I had the fortunate opportunity to work with, guys that are head coaches now for their own programs. And, there's been multiple times in my career where I went from a pretty comfortable position to one that was a lot less comfortable. And, when I left Western Reserve, I took an intern position at Kenyon College, and then I became the offensive coordinator, and then I became the athletic director there. And I didn't do that because I did anything spectacular or anything like that. It was just because I had a lot of fun doing what I was doing, and I put all of my passion and life into it. And the same thing happened when I left Kenyon as a head coach and I came to Rice as a quality control coach. I just tried to do the best job that I possibly could as a quality control coach, and really hope that work ethic and the passion that I had for the position that I was working with, which at the time was the receivers, would rub off on the rest of the unit. And Whether you place value to certain things like picking up the ball carrier or celebrating and you give those guys points for it or whatever it is, there has to be a way so that, you can make it as enjoyable for them as it is for you every day coming to work.
When you look at the guys you recruit, are you looking for that characteristic in them, that true love for the game? Because some guys, I think you'll agree with this, they love the recruiting process. They love the attention right now. But, sometimes you question, does this guy really love the game, even with the number of stars behind his name?
Yeah, I think that the process that we go through at Rice is unique. We had this year, I think Northwestern had less offers than we did, but we were the second to least amount of offers in the country. And so we really try to hone in on the guys that we think, A, are yieldable, but B, that we know a lot about. So we talk to the people that are important to them, whether it's their family members or their girlfriend or whatever it is. Obviously, the high school coach is huge, particularly here in Texas, to give us some insight on, on the kid and what makes him tick off the field and all of that stuff. And then you're looking for guys, similar to what we did at Kenyon, but guys that can develop. And all of those external people that have an effect on the day-to-day life of that recruit are going to give you some insight onto whether or not, that passion for the game is going to allow him to develop over a 4 or 5 year period here.
Specifically, when you're looking at those different, groups of people who are involved in that recruit's life, what things, I guess, if you give us some tangible examples of things that you start to see in that recruit that are going to tell you he's the right guy from the other people, I should say. You see it in him, of course, but what do those other people, those other stakeholders in that particular player tell you?
They're telling you what they're like in the weight room, right? They're telling you the type of effect that they have on the other kids on the team. What type of teammate are they? They're telling you what type of work ethic they have in the film room as well, and how much they actually love the scheme and get themselves immersed in the scheme. And then when you talk to a kid and you ask them to get on the board and talk to you about some aspect of the offense or some aspect of the defense, like you can tell right away when they get on the whiteboard, not just how much they know, but how much they love what they know. And I think that those questions that you ask lead to, determining whether or not the guy really loves football and he really wants to learn more.
So kind of extending that ahead to your tight ends room, in the way you use tight ends as well, a pro-style offense, you're going to end up with multiple skill sets, guys who can play maybe out wide sometimes, guys who can put their hand in the dirt, guys who need to play in the backfield, etc. How do you start to use those guys as far as the skill sets? What helps you figure out this is the kind of guy this guy could be for us?
Yeah, well, we start by teaching them all everything, and so they have to know the different techniques from an inline position, from an extended position, when they're in a hip position or whatever you call it in your offense. And then we determine, over reps in the course of the spring and the fall, when the reps are basically equal, what they're going to be really good at. And they have plenty of opportunity to put that on film. And we have a pretty extensive grading system for all of our practice reps so that we can break down by scheme or by technique exactly what they're good at. And it's not some, just ambiguous thought in your head. Like, I think that this kid's good at moving a 7 technique. You can actually see based on the numbers what that actually looks like and what their development's been over the course of the spring or over the fall or however you're judging them. So once we craft kind of what their skill set is and what they really are good at, then in our scheme, we could really use those guys specifically in determining, what they're going to perform or what they're going to be successful with. So for instance, we had one guy who could really do anything. He could put his hand down. He could play out of an off position. He could play extended, and he's pretty good at everything. But he's really good at split flow zone. And so when we ran split flow zone this year, or we ran the bluff play on the defensive end, that was the guy that was going to do it for us. And, he did it really well.
I know in that room, you can be very creative today. And it's funny. We've talked about this with a number of coaches on the podcast, how, there was a time when the tight end kind of went away for a while and was de-emphasized. And he used to be, before that, more the guy who was that extra tackle who is a little bit more dynamic or maybe lighter than a tackle, and not necessarily the guys that you see today. And certainly there's been that change, and you see how they're used in the NFL, and so the positions come back, tight ends and fullbacks in particular, H-backs. And those guys, though, now have become so much more dynamic. I mean, you look at a guy as an example like Kelsey, right? That guy, or Kittle, same type of guy. I mean, they're lining out wide. They're coming into the box. They're getting the ball underneath on, some power read stuff, maybe where they flip the ball to him, or even I've seen Kittle get a jet sweep before numerous times, right? So these guys now all of a sudden are more dynamic than they used to be, which allows you as their coach to be very creative in helping put together packages and how they're going to be used in the offense. How do you coach all of those different skill sets within one position group and then figure out how you can game plan them into the offense?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because they're the thing that holds the whole offense together. They hold the offensive line together with the quarterbacks, and then they hold the receivers together with the quarterbacks. And at Rice, in particular, we've had a pretty good history of tight ends playing in the NFL. There's two that are playing right now, Vance McDonald and Luke Wilson. And then James Casey, who's the tight end coach of the Bengals, was before them. And every one of those guys have a different skill set. Like James Casey returned punts for us, and he was our Wildcat quarterback. And one of the guys this year took snaps for us at running back in short yardage situations. So we spend a lot of time building relationships with different position groups on the team, and that's really how we do it, because our practice time in terms of individual work is limited. And then our film time in terms of scheme and stuff like that, we're in a lot of different installs. We're in the pass game install, we're in the run game install, and we don't have a lot of time in the meeting room individually either. So, it's just building relationships with those different position groups, and then making sure that those guys within their skill set are going to be successful doing the things that they do. And for me, the biggest learning curve was the offensive line stuff, because I've always been with the quarterbacks and the receivers. So this year, being able to be in the room with Coach Bloomgren, who has an offensive line background and coached offensive line for Stanford and in the NFL, if that was an invaluable learning experience for me. And then being in the room with those guys that are seniors that have been taught it before and have been successful with it before helped as well.
So I think the next question really is then, again, given that these guys do so many things, as you said, they're in the different installs, they're learning some different skills in the different positions they could play. How do you streamline the learning, right? Because I think if they're going to be successful, they've learned the scheme very well, they learned the techniques very well. So how do you streamline that for them as their coach?
Yeah, so when we have more meeting time in the spring and in the fall, we break that meeting time down to really focus on whatever the install is. And we always start the first 2 days with receiver 101. So we go through all of the receiver techniques and the perimeter blocking techniques. Anything that they're going to do from an extended position, we talk about the first and second day. And then once we go through that stuff in camp, like I like to separate. I don't go through and watch the film like these were the first 10 plays of Skelly or whatever. We try to separate that stuff by scheme, so that once we go through it, what I'll do is I'll put a clip of an NFL guy doing a certain technique that we're teaching, and then us doing a certain technique that we're teaching in practice, and then us doing it in a game at a successful level, so that they're able to see that stuff based on the scheme. Like, these are the techniques that we're using. These are other guys that have done it really successfully, and this is what we look like. Sometimes it looks better than others, but they always have a frame of reference for that.
So, Coach, you mentioned you have guys who can even line up in the backfield and run the football. And I know when I was at BW, we reintroduced the position into the offense, and so it took pulling guys from different positions that we hadn't recruited tight ends, nor at that time could we really find them. But we knew what other positions they played, in high school or previously for us. And, I'm thinking back through our time, there were at least 3 of those guys who we worked in some kind of a double pass or a throwback pass or something like that with these guys and use their ability to throw the football as well. So how do you find, end up with a guy at tailback who is a tight end?
Yeah. So we recruited him, or it was the previous coaching staff that recruited him, but recruited him as a tailback. He was a tailback at Dickinson High School down here in Houston, and he rushed for 2,200 yards as a senior. And he just had this skill set where you couldn't take him off the field. So if there was a better tailback than him, we still had to figure out a way to put the ball in his hands and allow him to do what he was really successful at. And what he's really successful at is working double teams with other tight ends in that like YY wing set, or getting him out on the perimeter and being able to block on the perimeter. Or obviously he's dynamic when he has the ball in his hands. Like I don't think he rushed for 2,200 yards in high school if you're not semi-dynamic. So as he put more weight on and he was able to move people a little bit more successfully, those were the roles that were kind of crafted for him.
When you look at your role in helping develop the game plan week to week, as the tight ends coach, what kind of things are you looking at, and what's your contribution to the game plan?
Well, I try to do everything that I can to tie the pass game into the run game. So in terms of, thinking about run action passes within what the scheme is, or play action passes where we can throw the ball down the field, that's pretty much my role in the game plan. And then obviously as a tight end coach, you look for as many opportunities to get multiple tight ends on the field as you can,
right,
so that those guys all can be successful within their role. But this year we were in a situation where we had a couple receivers that, ended up getting injured and that sort of thing. And it was just a weird season from a personnel standpoint in general. So a lot of those guys needed to step up, and they were able to.
Yeah, I loved using those guys. I didn't coach them at BW, but we really valued them. And it was one of the things I thought I made a mistake at one point in telling our guys that, even if they were in one personnel group, they were a starter in our offense. And so where it got me in trouble initially, momentarily, is every Friday we'd introduce our starting unit, right? After practice in the stadium. And one of the guys said to me, "Coach, how come I'm not named as a starter?" I'm like, "Oh man, I'm going to get in trouble with the head coach now." So, I said, "Well, we're going to always name one unit, but you guys are starters." And it's funny. It came around to the end of the year, and it was our last game. And I think we had like 9 personnel groups, and of those guys, maybe 4 or 5 of them, were in a personnel group. And I asked the head coach, I said, "Can we name all of our guys as starters?" So they were kind of surprised, and I got them in there. But it really helped. I think when you take that approach with whatever position, I felt like our depth chart went from being something that was very vertical to something that was horizontal, and guys saw they really had an opportunity to play. So I just felt it worked well with our culture, and it worked well in their focus. They knew that, hey, if we can have a lot of success when my personnel group is out on the field, we might stay in that group more. And I tell them all the time, if your group is having success, you guys will stay out. And it really became something they took pride in.
Yeah, absolutely. And like our whole thing as a tight end group, we call ourselves program guys, right? Because that's kind of what we have to be. We have to play 100+ snaps on special teams. We have to do all the dirty work as well, because that's the type of combo body type that we have, and that's how we can contribute to our collective success. But the big thing with that is, as a program guy, like you have to know what your role is, and you have to be extremely good in your role. But then you also have to compete to try to expand your role. So that's something that they've bought into, and we've had a lot of fun with.
Coach, shifting gears here and looking at some of the success and maybe even failure you've had in the program, and you've had, as a head coach, right? I think you learned a lot about this. A lot of what you get out of that, both the success and failure moving forward, is if you're able to learn from it. Can you explain your philosophy on the way you approach success and failure?
Yeah. I mean, when I said it before, and I continue to say it, but competing is not always about winning and losing. Like that is the main goal that you're trying to accomplish is to win. But you learn a lot from competing, and you can learn stuff from losing more than you can learn stuff from winning most often. So I've, as a head coach, had more failures than I have than I've had successes. It's just you could look at my overall record and you can tell that, right? And that's not going to change. And that's not something I shy away from either. That's something that's been an invaluable experience to me. And when you go back and you look at that stuff, I've always had the opportunity to be at high academic institutions. And I really feel like when you coach at a high academic institution, you have a responsibility to teach the kids at a level that's going to mirror the type of education that they're getting from the institution. So you have to coach them and you have to teach them at an extremely high level. One, to keep their attention because they're really bright kids too. And the other part is because that's what your responsibility is when you coach at a school like this. And when you're not living up to those expectations, you really have to take a look in the mirror and figure out what is a better way to be a teacher, what's a better way to connect with these guys, and what's a better way for us to collectively to have success moving forward. And so, over a 2-year period at Kenyon, we didn't have a lot of success at all. I mean, we did some good things offensively here and there and stuff like that. And that wasn't, that wasn't reflecting itself on the football field. But then I had the opportunity to go to one of our guys' weddings, and you look around at one of the guys that graduated, and at his wedding, there's 10 guys that he played college football with. So to some degree, that's where the success that we had was building those relationships and making sure that those kids' relationships are going to last well beyond the time that they graduate. And when you can focus more on that and not the X's and O's, I think that the winning is a byproduct of that. I don't think that it comes before you have those types of relationships that you build as a program.
Coach, I know you just spoke this past weekend as we're recording this on tight end technique in the pass game at Lawrence First and Goal Clinic. And first of all, a tremendous clinic, great job by everybody who was involved. Also, all of these individual talks are going to end up on CoachTube, but to continue to benefit Lawrence First and Goal, the sales of those individual clinic talks will continue to benefit the foundation and what they do with pediatric brain tumor research and cancer services. So if you would just give a brief overview of what you talked about in your clinic.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you're underselling yourself and your role in that clinic. Like what you did to facilitate that and to make it run as smoothly as it ran was unbelievable. And Coach Luce, making sure that he adapted to the time and not able to do the camp, so was able to do the clinic. I've been listening nonstop to clinic talks for the past 3 days, and I've learned so much in the past 3 days just from the ability to sit and do it. And when you think that all of that money that was raised went to such a great cause as the pediatric brain cancer research, it's humbling to have been a part of that clinic. And I really appreciate everything that you did specifically to make that thing go the way that it went. It was awesome. But what some of the stuff that we talked about in the clinic, we just broke everything down from the phases of route running to escape techniques and releases to the stack, the top of the route, the snap and the cut, and then the kill phase of the route when you're really creating that maximum separation between yourself and the defender. And then we got to some in-route techniques that we use, what we do when we catch the football running after the catch, and then some perimeter blocking techniques as well.
And I appreciate the kind words with that. And again, thank you for taking part in that. So Coach, as we wrap up here, the final question I like to ask everybody is, you look at all you do as a coach to help your players to do everything on and off the field, whatever it might be. What's the one thing you do that you really feel gives your players and your unit the winning edge?
I mean, I love our guys. I absolutely love them, and I'll do absolutely anything that they ever ask me to do at the drop of a dime. And I think that they know that. And because they know that, I think that they're willing to work really hard on the field and really willing to do everything that we ask them to do off the field in order to be a successful player. But, it's easy to say that, and it's another thing to just be genuine. And like, I absolutely love the guys that are in the tight end room and everybody else that I've worked with on this team, but specifically those guys because I spent so much time with them. And it's really been a privilege to be able to be in the room with them and for Bloom to entrust me with that group.
Coach, Twitter is always a great place for coaches to connect with you. What's your Twitter handle?
It's at coach_Mono, MONO. So please reach out. I love to hear from you guys, and I'll do anything I absolutely can to help you.
And for recruiting purposes, what areas of the country or what areas do you focus on?
I have some areas of Houston, Central Texas, and the Northeast, specifically New Jersey and the Philadelphia area.
Coach, I really appreciate your time, both at the clinic and today on this podcast. And good luck to you and the Owls in 2021.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Coaches, follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski, and be watching for all of the clinic talks that are being produced into courses available on CoachTube. Again, benefiting Lawrence First and Goal. That's CoachTube.com, and we will have the link to Coach's course, Tight End Technique in the Pass Game, in our show notes.